Discussions have an important role in our lives. They influence our thinking, our social relations, our decision making, and our actions. Public discussions or debates often precede and influence political decision making, which again affects us. Therefore, it is in our best interest that discussions give useful results, instead of manipulating us or simply wasting our time. This video is mostly about diagrams that can help us to have better and shorter discussions. But before making any diagrams, we need to find out what we expect from a better discussion. After that, we need to take a quick look at which reality these diagrams reflect. Note: the diagram types in this video come in addition to the multi-party decision matrices introduced in the original book. Rather use one of those matrices if the discussion is about choosing between decision options. In an ideal discussion, the participants talk or write about a precisely defined topic and nothing else. Agree on the purpose of the discussion. Treat each other with respect. Express themselves clearly. Consider each other's viewpoints and arguments with open minds. Come to their conclusions after they have heard and evaluated all arguments, and do all this without wasting time. In real-life discussions, the participants often do exactly the opposite, sometimes in all 7 aspects. Results, if any, are accordingly. Unfortunately, because this happens so often, it is widely considered as normal and acceptable behavior. Real-life discussions are often rather debates. In a debate, the participants try to convince each other, or at least their audience, of their opposing positions. Arguments are used to attack or defend positions, rather than to arrive at well-founded conclusions. Back to the discussions. There is no practical way to ensure that discussion participants behave ideally, as outlined 2 pages before. But there are at least 3 approaches that can help. Education and training, especially when started at early age. Discussion rules. Visualization techniques. When combined, these approaches bring ideal discussions within reach. But already one of them alone can make a discussion better. Approach 1 requires long-term thinking and much preparation. Approaches 1 and 2 require either authority over potential participants or their full cooperation. Approach 3 does neither. Whether you are a participant or an audience member, you can always listen to what is said and make a diagram of it. More precisely, you can follow the discussion, extract claims, arguments and evaluations from it, convert that information into visual form, a diagram, and make the diagrams available to participants and audience. But how can a diagram help to make a discussion better? A good discussion support diagram does not reproduce verbal smokescreens, other rhetorical tricks, insults and off-topic statements. Hence, it can give better overview, clarity and focus. and once the participants see that an argument has been registered in the diagram, they may refrain from repeating it. The ideal discussion aspects 1, 3, 4, maybe 6 and definitely 7 could benefit from all this. A lot more could be said about discussions, but that is beyond the scope of this video. No two persons have exactly the same perception of reality. Something I consider as fact, you might consider as someone's opinion. Something you consider as valid conclusion, I might consider far-fetched. And so on. This can easily lead to misunderstandings, confusion and/or conflicts. To avoid these, the diagram maker, ideally all discussion participants, must understand the difference between observations and interpretations. Your observations are what your 5 senses tell your mind. Your interpretations are what your mind makes of that. Observations versus interpretations. Examples. The green boxes contain observations. Source, the eyes. Yellow boxes contain interpretations. Source, the mind. Observations are easier to agree on than interpretations, and generally provide more reliable information. Note that 100% pure observations can be hard to obtain. Quite often there are traces of interpretation blended with observations. Just think about the words smiled and usual from the examples. What bearing does all this have on the making of argument maps and similar diagrams? Because the diagram maker needs to summarize or rephrase arguments presented by others, such diagrams cannot be observation only. However, if the diagram maker follows a suitable code of conduct, the diagram will convey a neutral view. If not, such diagrams could be abused for public opinion manipulation. Therefore, it must always be clear to the audience who made the diagram and which, if any, code of conduct the diagram maker adhered to. These diagrams will never be perfectly true in a scientific or philosophical sense. Yet, they can be very helpful in practice. Argument maps can have various layouts. The ones in this video are optimized for easy access. Most people will understand them without extra explanations. This is important because difficult to read diagrams often end up not being read or not being understood. In both cases, they become useless. Please note that the next pages do not explain how to read an argument map, but how to make one. Argument map, basic structure. The starting point for this type of argument map is the discussed question. Best suited are questions with 2 possible answers. If the discussion has already taken place, but without a clearly expressed topic question, this question must be constructed afterwards. It is very important that the question is precisely phrased, must be answerable without the need for lofty assumptions, neutrally phrased, must not indicate a preferred answer, immediately understandable for the target audience. Bad examples. Are young people lazy? Should private investors finally get a chance to run our water supply infrastructure more efficiently? Good example. Should ABC City sell its water supply infrastructure to private investors? Next, arguments directly supporting an answer are listed. They are the main arguments. All arguments are color-coded according to the answer they support. Note that these colors must not indicate any preference, as for instance red or green would. Main arguments are often rebutted, contradicted or supported by sub-arguments. Arguments not directly referring to an answer. Third order arguments are also often present. Fourth and fifth order arguments sometimes. Beyond that, the discussion almost certainly has gone astray. Argument map, example 1. Argument map, example 2. All arguments must be phrased concisely and without indicating approval or rejection. You can clearly see the lines of arguments in either example. With an argument map, you can understand the discussion in 2 to 5 minutes. Without one, you probably would have to listen or read for hours. And you might even end up with confusion rather than understanding. Note that you also can use argument maps for discussions with yourself. In that case, you could effectively clear your head by making one. It takes about 30 to 90 minutes. This map shows 23 arguments and the logical connections, but would still fit comfortably on a single A4 or letter-sized page, or about half that page when using a typical newspaper font size of 8 to 9 point. That's a format which is easy to distribute or publish, both on paper or electronically. After reading an argument map, you will have a first impression of which answer you find better supported. Depending on the situation and on how clear your impression is, you must decide whether closer evaluation is needed. Argument evaluation is subject of the next pages. Alternatively, you could extract the criteria used in arguments and put them in the decision matrix, where the possible answers become options. Criteria from the example 1 map: accident survival chances, health status after accident, convenience, coolness of appearance, and more. Options from the example 1 map: wear a seatbelt, don't wear a seatbelt. The result of an argument evaluation depends not just on the argument, but also on the evaluating person. That's because different persons have different reality perceptions and value systems. We find different things important. Other persons, therefore, are not necessarily mistaken or stupid just because they arrive at different results. If you want to criticize a wrong evaluation result, you should make it clear whether you disagree with the underlying value system or with the evaluation method used. Now let's have a look at one of these methods. A simple and efficient way of evaluating an argument is to ask and answer yourself 3 questions. Question 1. Do you consider the argument as true? A summarized argument takes usually the form of a statement. If you consider it as true, perhaps giving it the benefit of doubt, proceed to the second question on the next page. Otherwise, the evaluation is completed. Each grey box shows a possible evaluation result. Question 2. Do you consider it as relevant? If you consider the argument as relevant, having a bearing on the topic, proceed to the third question. Again, you may give it the benefit of doubt. Otherwise, the evaluation is completed. Question 3. How important is it to you? Now your personal value system kicks in with full strength and determines your choice. Explicit evaluation examples. We know about argument maps and about argument evaluation. Let's see how we can bring them together in a diagram. Our new diagram starts out as a copy of the original argument map, but without the sub-arguments. Now there is room next to the main arguments. That's where we put our evaluation results. Of course, we must consider all connected sub-arguments when evaluating a main argument. But usually we don't need to include individual sub-argument evaluations in the diagram. This way we get a much simpler diagram than otherwise. And there is room for more than one view. For Alice and Bob, this diagram is both summary and endpoint of their discussion. Without it, they could easily have an endless discussion. Multi-party argument evaluation, example 2. Generally, a high percentage of not valid evaluations could indicate a very controversial question, a close-minded party, or a bad argument. Note that this diagram partly reveals each party's reality perception. Which arguments do they see as true and relevant, hence valid? And their value system. How important is each argument to them? In a political context, this diagram type can serve as transparency tool. Now let's take a step back from the details and do some summing up. Many normal discussions suffer from empty talk, manipulation attempts, poor reasoning, personal insults, hidden agendas, or lack of focus and overview. Such discussions can take a long time without giving useful results. If the topic is important and you can choose, consider this alternative. Make an argument map. Evaluate the main arguments. Draw your conclusions. Just for yourself or in cooperation with others. In most cases, you will have well-founded results within 1 to 3 hours.